Welcome back to the broadcast. Important that you're part of this discussion. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela at TV47 KE. It's now, yes, like I said, for the current time for the current affairs segment, where we take a look at the stories that have been making headlines, and we have a comprehensive conversation revolving around them. Joining me for the same is Gloria Oroba, who's a youth policy analyst, and governance expert Joseph Simeha to expound some more on that. Morning, lady and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good to have you.
Yeah.
All right, now let's kickstart the conversation, and we all know that, again, we cannot have a current affairs conversation. It revolves around the country without mentioning the case that is ongoing in regards to matters graft charges that are leveled against Migori Governor Okoth Obada alongside his children and his close allies, and of course the family members of the close allies. Now, ODM party have kicked on the impeachment motion, or talk of an impeachment motion. And coming to you, Gloria, I don't know what you make of the conversations that have been ongoing at this particular time on matters graft in the country, even before we delve deep into, that question of Obado.
I think it's good that we are actually seeing traction in terms of the arrests, in terms of actual follow through, and as much as they're getting bail, and their legal representatives are really trying their best to see what they can get them out of. I am glad that finally it's not only the aspect of them being arrested, but also how are we holding them accountable in terms of holding office. To see ODM as a party come out strong and say that we have to impeach Obado is also a reaction, because a lot of people had been speculating that suddenly, because of ODM's position, or the statement that Edwin Sifuna actually put out as the Secretary General, there seems to be confusion on, is ODM supporting graft or not. So I think this is them coming out strong and saying we are not going to support corruption. And as a matter of fact, now that Obado has actually been arrested, and it looks like there is substantial evidence for a case to proceed, and in any case he has actually been barred out of office. So ODM is saying, yes, why not impeach him? And then remember, over 40, I think, is it 42 MCAs out of 42 MCAs, is it 41?
37, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they have the majority of the MCAs. So, I mean, I can imagine looking at it, trying to pass an impeachment motion might be a walk in the park. So, and they've already embraced the idea that in the event that they successfully impeach him, they're actually going to allow for the deputy governor to, take office. After all, I think what is happening is that even as a party, ODM is realizing that their position in terms of graft, in terms of corruption, has to be very strong, and it has to be clear that they are against corruption. They are not going to defend their own when it comes to that.
Let me come in and loop Joseph Simeha on the same. Is it a question of ODM realizing that yes, they are against corruption, or it is a question of politics? Because recently we've seen Obado categorically registering his interest on backing or also working together with the deputy president.
I think what really matters is, first of all, let me say very clearly that issues of corruption ought to be issues of politics.
Yeah.
That we should stop saying that, politics cannot come in. In fact, we will be a lot more effective in fighting corruption in this country.
All right.
If and when we put a political price, a very heavy political price, on corruption.
But just how genuine is that? Well, I know that is the ultimate goal, but sometimes when you see politics crippling in, I mean, most of the leaders are not genuine in terms of defending, or are not genuine in terms of castigating the individuals in question.
I think you should measure the genuineness in relation to what ODM thinks with regards to two things.
Yeah.
One, how the voters, ODM supporters in Migori and elsewhere will react. And secondly, how ODM will be perceived generally in politics after losing this governor. Now, it would appear to me that the signals the party has received from voters in Migori, and this is very important, is that they would be okay with that. If it did not, if it wasn't sure, if the leadership of the party wasn't sure that that the voters in Migori, the ODM supporters in Migori and in that neighborhood would be okay with Obado being impeached, they would hesitate.
Yeah.
So I'm pointing out this deliberately, Linda, that it is so important that it finally rests with the people. The people to be, whatever we need to fear, whatever political leaders need to fear, whatever high public officials need to fear, is the people of the Republic of Kenya.
Right.
And that signal needs to be sent to parties all the time that if you do not do this, and that is if you don't really show true commitment to fighting corruption, it will cost you politically.
Mm-hmm. All right. And speaking of the same, let's overlook that aspect of ODM and look into the aspect of, Senate's mixed reactions on a ruling that, of course, was set last year. It was said to bar governors facing charges from accessing their office. In what has turned out to be a different conversation, the Senate says that, this is unfair because then the conversation should take that direction, in comparison to what is enshrined in the Constitution that, an individual is innocent until they're proven guilty. So barring the governors from accessing their offices before the courts themselves get to declare them guilty, according to the senators, is an unfair move, and maybe the ruling should be looked into. And maybe we have a reverse of the same. Gloria, what do you make of this talk of the senators? Is it because, yes, again, politically they know that they are headed to governorship?
Definitely, that's one of the reasons why they'd be opposing it. But I would like to think of it this way: if there are very heavy allegations that I am a corrupt leader,
yeah.
And the only way to prove that I am not corrupt is through the dealings of my office. Now, if I'm allowed to keep that office and continue operating and having access to that office, and then to the extent that I might interfere with the evidence in any court of law, if there's a risk that the alleged person who is in question might interfere with the evidence that is there, definitely. The thing that the courts are allowed to do is actually make sure that that does not happen. So for me, I see barring anyone from office is because they have reasonable a reasonable explanation to show that indeed you can interfere with the evidence that is there to prove your innocence and to prove otherwise. So if you're fighting that you should not be barred from office, are you trying to say that you're already guilty and so you want to make sure that you're tampering with that evidence? What I think also should be done is that same level of the restrictions that we are putting on the governors, we should also put that level of restrictions on our cabinet secretaries. We should put it on anyone who's actually holding a public office, whether on senior level or on junior level, because as well on junior level, if there are any allegations, you are suspended indefinitely until they can clear your name. But when you look at what is happening at the Ministry of Health, Mutahi Kagwe is still accessing his office, and yet there has been allegations that he's been involved in the KEMSA haste. So, I mean, for me, it is the law cuts across. And if we're going to put measures that are going to make sure that public funds are not lost through our governors, through our senators and elected leaders, we should also look at it from the executive and also ensure that the cabinet secretaries, the permanent secretaries, the CASs and all those in senior level to that point are also facing the same restrictions.
All right. And speaking of which, again, looking at the same scenario and, just trying to expound some more on what really bedevils the counties. Many have argued that corruption has been devolved, which, yes, is still a question of debate. But looking at the deputy governors, there's been that conversation that, again, deputy governors are always out there trying to paint a bad picture of their bosses, so at least they would get space. Of late, we've seen the deputy governor of Migori equally coming out so strong. And much as we all acknowledge that, yes, in the absence of the governor, he takes the help, it looks like, it is clear and evident that this is what is probably most of the deputies will be waiting for. And we've seen a lot of witch hunt that has been propagated to see off or to see to it that they root out the governor so they can pick up the position. How best can this be handled, in as much as maybe you say that, yes, politics has to play in every time that we're dealing with graft? Simeha.
First of all, just to throw my 2 cents worth of in the earlier question you asked
on the senators, yes.
The question of trust, an office of public trust, is so important that for anyone to serve effectively in an office of public trust, they must enjoy the trust of the people.
Yeah.
Now, it's such that our national character is so bad that even when there are heavy allegations weighing on your shoulders, on your head, we still insist that I will stay in office, to an extent of one minister infamously saying he'd rather die than resign. It is not that it is showing that you are guilty. By stepping aside, it's not a show of guilt. It is a recognition of the fact that these allegations cloud your ability to serve the public effectively. And therefore, you ought to say that this is not my private office, it's not my private business. The people for whom I serve here may not be assured that I will serve them well with this burden on my head. Let me discharge this burden first. And if I discharge it effectively, I can come back and serve the people. Mm-hmm. And it is because of our bad national character that it forces the judiciary to make those kind of decisions for us and force us to stay out of office when we have these allegations weighing on us. Mm-hmm. Now, if I quickly go to the question you asked on deputy governors, ideally it should be that the deputy governors, just like deputy president, are principal assistants of the chief executive of the county, meaning that they run the county together. The governor provides leadership, the deputy assists. That anytime, not just because of graft, not because of illness, anytime the deputy can step in and provide leadership, the governor can give space. The governor can actually take leave and give space to the deputy to provide leadership for certain times, meaning that they would have developed a relationship of trust. But again, I go back to our question, our problem of national character. Mm-hmm. Because we have this problem in this country of very bad national character with regards to public office. Two people go into an office that they should be running in public trust, but the main person sees it as his or her personal office, that they cannot allow anybody else to know what goes on in his or her office. Yet this is an office of public trust. So it's a bigger question of our national character that then forces deputy governors to stay in the shadows because they're afraid that if they step forward and show any sign of leadership, it is perceived as attempting to overshadow their boss. That should not be a question because those two offices are offices of public trust. Those two people are not working for themselves. They are working for citizens of the Republic of Kenya. They are working for the county. So it is very right, as the law says, that regardless of the circumstances, if a governor is unable to discharge his or her responsibilities in office, regardless of whether they like the deputy or not, the deputy should step in and take over the mandate.
Okay. Well, interesting view, and is a case that we're following up closely, and we'll be right here to update you on the events or the developments of the same. Parliamentary watchdogs equally call for the ouster of governors in graft cases. They encourage the members of the county assembly to take charge and, come on board with impeachment motions of these individuals, which again is something that has brought a lot of question mark in regards to the numerous cases that we've witnessed across different counties. And you find that, 3/4 of the governors are, facing allegations of corruption. So leaves a lot to be decided. But that aside, still on the level of the counties, there's been a stalemate. And for the longest of time, it's been hard for the Senate to resolve this stalemate on sharing of revenue across the counties. And as though we all thought that this is finally out, or this is finally over, based on the conversation that was there, that there's been this committee that has been set, and the committee is set to give us solutions. And sometimes last week, it looked like, there was a white smoke. But then again, the committee comes out to tell us that, they are yet to get a resolve on the same. Gloria, what do you make of this left on back and forth on matters sharing of revenue at the level of the county? Is it that hard?
I don't think it's that hard. I'm actually very disappointed because I was hoping once they had the 12-member committee and with the personalities that were in there, and they were exuding a lot of positivity in terms of, we are going to put the politics out. I mean, we saw Murkomen tweeting on, finally let the people say, be listened to. And I had so much hope. I actually thought it was a matter of finally going back to sitting, there are a little bit of give and take without any interference from the executive or without any interference from political figures, because there was alleged interference from the Prime Minister and orders from above. And I thought that once they said, okay, this thing is ours, it's back to the Senate where it should belong, and, truly for us to debate and figure out this population versus land masses, I really thought that it would have taken them a week, and they would come out and say, okay, we've agreed to compromise on this level when it comes to, the ASAL areas, and come back to this. I don't think it's that hard. I actually now, I have to say that I was wrong, and I feel as though now what is happening is it is a clash of personalities, and it is becoming a sort of show of might, because most of the people who are in that committee have got bigger ambitions outside from Senate. And they probably feel this is an opportune time to show my prowess in my politics and how much I can rally against or for. And it's really, I really don't think that it's about the actual formula.
Yeah.
So having said that, I also, now, we have to start questioning what happens if the stalemate takes too long, What then? Because the counties at one point would have used their 50%, which they are allowed to access. At one point, you actually have to budget in the future, knowing what kind of revenue you're going to receive as a county. And above and beyond that, during this pandemic, this is a time when you need to be sure on the budget lines that you have on issues such as health, on issues such as education, because those are the two hardest hit public services that government should be giving the people. So I'm starting to be anxious, and I can imagine that a lot of Kenyans are anxious because they are saying now, this thing is stuck. So what now? Should we call on the executive? Should we? I mean, I'm disappointed. I'm truly disappointed about what's going on.
All right. I don't know whether Simeha is equally as disappointed. Why is it so hard for the Senate to get a solution? Why is it taking so long for us to get answers as to this, even as, yes, the counties continue to grapple with tough times?
It is taking so long and appearing so hard because the drama we are seeing is constituted from what I would call this distributive software in the question of shared prosperity in this nation. The constitutive hardware, because the software depends on the hardware. How we've constituted how this nation shares its prosperity and its opportunities to participate in productivity. Unless we revisit that constitutive hardware, surely, we are not going to agree on the distributive software. Listen, we are pretending to be fighting over 316 or thereabout billion shillings out of a national budget of more than 3 trillion Kenya shillings. Is that real? No. I think there's a lot of dishonesty. I think there's a lot of dishonesty in this debate. And when you consider how some people frame it, when you hear, for example, some people frame it as Mount Kenya versus this, or these people versus those, or pastoralists, but when it should be about the Kenyan Senate discussing about allocation of resources to Kenyan counties, then you begin to understand the betrayals that are fueled by dishonesty. This is why that debate in the Senate will not solve the problem. The problem is deeper. We therefore need a deeper national solution, which to me is a national dialogue on shared productivity and shared prosperity. We need to undo and redo the hardware for sharing what we call the national cake, and not just sharing, first of all, baking it, everyone having an opportunity to participate. Kenyans truly owning the economy of the Republic of Kenya, Kenyans truly owning the means of production for themselves, and Kenyans sharing the fruits of that production. So we are debating over a very small aspect, and for me it's just what I call the software, the distributive software, but we're leaving the constitutive hardware intact. This problem will recur again and again and again.
All right, speaking of recurring, and the conversation on ground again revolves around getting the solution as at now. Something that has been looked at as a common phenomenon when leaders are addressing issues, that the leader who is there, or the leadership at hand, will always get short-term solutions to crucial issues, knowing very well that after a while they probably are not going to be there. Why is it always the case in most cases? And like you see, we know very well that this is enshrined in the Constitution. There needs to be a lasting solution into the same, or a lasting deliberation on this particular issue. But then again, most of the senators bring out proposals that revolve around a short-term approach of the matter. Gloria?
I think that's because most of the senators are actually elected leaders. The only thing that is really in their mind once they get into office is how to come back again into office. So they're not really thinking about in the event that I don't come back to office, how are these policies going to affect me as a commoner, as a civilian, as a person who's not in elective office. So you'll find that the decisions right now are driven with, I have ambitions to become a governor. I absolutely must be the person that decided during the stalemate that I swayed a certain decision to the favor of the people that I'm hoping to elect with. So some of these people are actually already building their manifestos with the activities that are happening now in terms of policies and in terms of taking positions on certain debates at the House. So, and we can't, I don't think that is a thing we can change overnight. I think it's a thing that we can change in terms of the culture of the elected leaders. And that culture of elected leaders can only change when we stop electing this caliber of leaders. So it goes back to the people, as my colleague says again. It's about the people. We have to focus on the people, but also the people have a responsibility to be very aware on what is happening right now with the elected leaders that we voted in, so that by the time 2022 comes in, I don't have a selective amnesia and a sudden urge to just vote the popular person at the moment. I have to remember that it took over 9 sittings for the Senate to actually agree on how they are going to spend my money on my services. And when I say that, it's my money because I'm the tax payer on my services, because it is me who's waiting for ambulances to be able to call so that I can be taken in case I have COVID-19. It's me who's waiting for education for my children. So, I mean, when we bring it down, that whatever is happening in these houses is happening because of me as the civilian who elected this person, then we'll start seeing, in fact, what I'm really hoping the civil society and me included in there is that I'm hoping now, since we've given these leaders so much time to figure out, and we've seen that they're incapable of coming up with a formula that is a win-win, then it's time for us to now come out and say, okay, if you guys can't do it, we might as well put in our steering committee with representatives and see how well to intervene, because it is us who are being affected.
And lastly, on the very same, with a political eye to this, and I think it started on that note where, yes, there are senators who have interest of getting to the gubernatorial position in 2022 and even in years to come. And, in most cases, they're looking at their regions and how they're going to represent their regions. Some arguing that, of course, they equally look at the monies that are going to be presented to them when they are top of the helm. With this political eye, are we really going to get a genuine solution on this one, Simeha?
We may not. For whatever it takes, I'm sure there will be some solution. And by the way, the fact that the Senate is not rising to the occasion doesn't mean there's no solution, because there is a solution in law. The current formula continues until the Senate eventually, decides to be reasonable and they agree and give us a solution. But nevertheless, even if they don't, because of what you point out, political interests and so on and so forth, which, by the way, interests are what drives politics. If only these senators were coming and their party leaders were coming out openly declaring their interests, and then we negotiate these interests in an open atmosphere, rather than this conjecture, this dishonesty, and so on. It wouldn't be a problem. But because, as Linda there says, they come in pretending, putting on a face of pretense, but behind that face of pretense, they're driven by certain interests, which would be better if they would just speak openly and negotiate these interests as Kenyans. They articulate these interests and negotiate them as Kenyans on behalf of Kenyans. And ultimately, then we get a solution.
Will we get a balanced solution, or say a solution that will probably impress a majority of Kenyans, because they are on the quest for getting, equity for all the counties? Is it even realistic?
Yes. I said earlier that what is in Senate just now is defective. By the way, I said that it's a formula and a process of sharing out resources premised on a defective and unfair and equitable constitutive framework or constitutive hardware. So for now, I am sure we can get a prudent decision coming out of Senate. I'm sure that we can get something we can live with, but we have to seize a political opportunity to rediscuss, to revisit our history as a nation. Because if we had got it right, even with the Constitution, we wouldn't be where we are. It should be working. I know also that you can give a good Constitution to terrible people and they'll mess it up, as has happened in this country. But also, if we could do it better in terms of our constitutive mechanism framework, I think it will cut out the mischief in future. And that's why, in my opinion, we have to seize every opportunity, particularly to resolve the national question, the political question. It's bigger than what we are seeing in Senate. When you see people panic, some of them it's because they have always taken shelter in whatever in the fact that it is their person. They take comfort in the fact that the president is our person, so we are fine. You see them panic not because they have had trust in individuals, not in the system. Shouldn't we be stopping as Kenyans and saying, hold on, for how long will we live like this? Can we talk to each other and sort out the system through which we govern ourselves, so that whenever we are faced with this kind of software issues, it is so easy to resolve. But because of the anxiety and mistrust, it is so difficult until we get back to sitting together to resolve the national question.
Okay, and we leave that aside as we all wait to see what will happen. We cross over to this matter. We're all privy to how the curve has been, shooting up and flattening, every other day. The Ministry of Health is treating us to, the information that is at hand, telling us the numbers and how they are, and of course continuing to call upon Kenyans to be, privy to what is there, and most importantly, to abide by the guidelines that have been set. Of late, we have witnessed, a lower trajectory on, numbers going down on matters COVID-19, which in most cases would be looked at as, a sigh of relief, would be looked at as a positive thing. But World Health Organization, on the other hand, says that it's still too early to celebrate. First of all, Gloria, what do you make of the flat numbers that we are treated to of late, and not overlooking again the aspect of politics as it stands, or the interests on matters politics in the country?
There is a very laughable and funny tweet, or is it meme, that going around saying Dennis Okari stopped Corona and he brought a cure. After the big expose and everything, the curve started to flatten, and then the numbers dropped. This speaks a lot on what the public thinks in terms of trusting the numbers that are being presented to them by government. Of course, there has been a lot of ongoing activities around grafts, loss of funds and things like that. So I'll speak to it from a point of politics, and then also from a point of public trust. Now, from my point of politics is we're very well aware that there's when Corona came in, a lot of there were things that were ongoing. For instance, the BBI campaigns were they were at the peak, and we were starting to see them start getting that traction and everything. And then, of course, Corona came, and we had to go on lockdown. And the lockdown, as according to me, has facilitated a lot of things, has facilitated a lot of behind-the-scene political mobilization. It has been a time when politicians have started to understand, okay, now we can go and do our usual public rallies. What now? How do we keep relevance? It's also during this time that we have been subjected to a lot of very awkward moments between the president and the deputy president, because of course, as a nation, you are expecting to have a front that would show solidarity, and there has been questionable instances in terms of how the first announcements were being put together. Just recently, we saw that allegedly the deputy president was cut off during a conference or talking about post-COVID and how we have handled it. Yeah. So, I mean, there have been, I would say that certain politicians have been creative enough to take this opportunity to ride the political wave and create new inroads and different allies. And you know, it started to feel like this is no longer about us as Kenyans, and we are being told to sit in the house and stay put and, you know, sanitize, while we are seeing other people holding meetings, while we were seeing other political events ongoing, and from certain divides were allowed, the other ones were not allowed. So I would say it was very interesting to see how politics still evolves no matter what, whether it is a lockdown, no matter whether it is a pandemic. Politics will be politics, and the politicians will do their thing. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the health, from the perspective now of the health, I don't believe in these numbers, and that is my personal opinion, because, and to put the point out, I actually got my son out of school 2 weeks before Corona was announced in Kenya, because I had started reading a lot about it and stuff like that. But at one point I realized we were going about it the wrong way, because up till now, Linda, we don't have, as we are looking to go back to school, to open up the economy fully, to, you know, remove the restrictions, we are not doing anything different other than the masks and the hand sanitizers. So if that's all it took for us to open the economy, by the time we started wearing the masks and using the sanitizers, we could have already let the economy continue thriving in whatever forms that it could. So for me, on a health perspective, I don't trust those numbers. I actually think that those numbers have to drop, because we have received a lot of negative publicity in terms of our government, like from the donor community. And we've also, it's starting to shine a light in places that our government would not really want that light to go. So of course the numbers have to go down. Mm-hmm. The curve has to be flattened. And that's my personal opinion on this number.
Justice Simeha, not just Gloria's personal sentiments, but equally the sentiments of numerous Kenyans out here, you know, who after observing the trends, after observing what is happening across the global fraternity, they come to that point where they conclude, you know what, probably there is literally not no corona, or if it is there, then at least what it is that we're being fed in terms of numbers, in terms of information in the country, is not being done in the right way, is probably not the right information that should be given. What does it speak moving on?
I think first of all, it's just to confirm that I hold the same opinion, and I often advise people that it's the patriotic duty of every well-informed citizen never to trust their government. Do not trust what they tell you. Check it out. Only after you are confirmed, then you can offer your government support. You do have a patriotic duty to always put pressure and do not trust. Because the moment you begin to trust, blindly, without questioning critically, without pushing and forcing them to come out of those closets, they continue to take advantage of you. And especially a government of our government, with a nation with such a national character like we do have in this country. Mm-hmm. So more specifically with regards to coronavirus, I would say that be cautious. We've seen more than enough evidence. I'll only speak about one thing. Linda has spoken about one other. I'll speak about one thing. Just revisit about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, the frenzy about beds. That each county, 300 beds, and there's a frenzy, and they drive out a frenzy. And Linda, all that is about tenderpreneurship. It's about tenders. It's about procurement. Instead of there being a frenzy about informing citizens, educating citizens, developing and strengthening our preventive and primary health care in the county, investing in community health workers, investing in public health workers. There's a frenzy about what you can procure. I hope they, by the way, bought the 500 beds from the young man in Kiambu. So there's that frenzy. They create all these things for procurement and tenders. Beware of a government that behaves the way our government behaves. And it's best, actually, it's patriotic duty to be skeptical, don't trust, assume you are on your own, and continue with the precautions. At least these precautions, they are there universally. We will not doubt this coronavirus because we've seen the effects of coronavirus all over the world.
Yes.
So it is best to take extreme precautions, like washing hands and basically sanitation, sanitizing, having masks on, social distancing, and any other reasonable precaution you can take as you watch the drama that is happening in government. Look, one final thing, Linda, we have had so much drama from Magoha about schools from March 2020. You do not see anything at all in terms of preparation for any possible reopening of schools.
Right.
You do not know, you see anything. You continue hearing these dramatic statements from his mouth, speaking sometimes from both sides of the mouth, but you do not see anything going into a process of preparing the education sector that involves the government, teachers, parents, and schools preparing for a possible reopening, as you see in other places. That tells you where this government is with regards to your safety and your health. We are pretty much on our own until we seize a moment. Again, I go back to it. As a nation, we seize a moment, by the way, to have a national discourse on where have we gone wrong, how can we make it right. I'll slip in one quick thing. During that close down, when Linda speaks about BBI rallies and so on going down, there was some silver lining on that cloud. I'm privy to information that it was now even better for BBI because could come before that steering committee soberly, without costume, without songs, without shouting in rallies and so on, and come and soberly present their issues, soberly discuss their interests, make proposals and so on and so forth. I should hope that if and when they bring back BBI on the table, that is how we proceed. And we don't go back to dancing and shouting and insulting each other, but talking with each other as a nation.
All right, and briefly, just to wind up on this particular subject, because yes, Gloria, as you top up on what you went to say, equally address this one. The very same government that we're talking about, the very same government that has interest, is equally the same government that is tasked to deal with the cancer case that we're talking about, graft case. Just how possible is it for us to get answers and have some of these people charged, recovery of the assets and monies that were lost?
I think we can't run away from a government that we elected. We elected this government, and it's the same way I kept on telling people: you elected Sonko, you elected Sakaja, you elected these people. We went to the polling stations and we voted for these people in. And if we don't want these people, it is also our duty for us to say, actually, we are tired of this government. We go back to the constitution, look for legal ways to now say we are tired and what next, and if there's anything we can do, because we elected this government. It's not a government that came in by force or by coup or by, we had elections. So, and on the point on whether we should, for me, I don't look at it as don't trust your government and it is your responsibility. How I see it is okay to be critical. Being critical doesn't mean that I don't trust you. It means that there are actions that you might be taking and I am questionable about, the end results or how they are being taken. So being critical of a government is not necessarily a negative thing, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust your leaders. We have to trust the systems that we put in place, because those systems, even now, as we are thinking about a referendum, it is us who are putting those systems in place. It is not a colonial system from somewhere. Now, in terms of KEMSA, do we trust our government to hold these people accountable? These alleged thugs, murderers, if you want to say. Well, our constitution, which we brought in place, it brought devolution in terms of we have the executive, we have the judiciary, we have the legislature, and also we have independent arms such as the EACC. So we are hoping that, and I'm speaking from a very informed perspective in terms of a civilian, I am personally hoping that for once during this period where we are executing this constitution that we have had for 10 years, that we finally get to see the separation of powers. We get to see these independent systems, whether it is the judiciary or the anti-corruption commissions, DPP, and the other systems, acting independent of influence from legislature or from the executive. Meaning, if there have been names of certain people who have been mentioned as being a part of the COVID-19 heist, the COVID billionaires, whether they are related to the Chief Justice, whether they are related to the President or the Deputy President, what we want to see is finally that element of separation of powers within this constitution, that it doesn't matter who you are affiliated to, but there's enough evidence to hold you accountable, to actually convict you. We would like to see you in prison. Mm-hmm. We would like to see you not only in prison, but your assets frozen. And in fact, not only frozen and then we forget about them somewhere, they're sitting there waiting to be stolen back by, the same caliber of thugs, but frozen and turned into property of the public. Mm-hmm. So if you have gone and bought a hotel somewhere with stolen public funds, can we see that completely taken out of your power and actually turned into some sort of public facility, like it can be our what do you call it, post-COVID-19 research center, or they're trying to put an emergency kind of thing. Okay. The rejoinder I wanted to put on the COVID-19 is I know that now there's a lot of talk on of more steering committees on post-COVID-19. And that's fine, because there's justification for it on how to handle another pandemic if it comes or stuff like that, as much as we have emergency bodies for that. Mm-hmm. I think that money that we are spending on post-COVID-19 steering committees or agencies or whatever, they should really think through on the outputs. What are we intending to achieve from these steering committees? Mm-hmm. Are we actually going to finally come out with a resiliency plan such that if the pandemic comes back the second time, we actually know step 1, shut down the border, step 2, from the lessons learned. Yeah.
All right. And Kenyans continue to bear the brunt of the same, and all this that we have highlighted as the ills that have come along courtesy of COVID-19. A report yesterday by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics says that 1.7 million Kenyans have been jobless since April up until now, in between. And we all thought that we were going to stay afloat. But it looks like, times are getting tougher and tougher for the Kenyans. And you know what? A majority of them have decided, let's overlook this and let's go out there and try and fend for ourselves, because clearly the government is not going to do that. Don't you think then that Kenyans are justified, Joseph Simera, to again flout the rules that have been set by the Ministry of Health, just so they would at least guarantee themselves, a life, or guarantee themselves, time and moment to stay afloat?
I would say that except where, the rules are unreasonable, overall for me, the rules are reasonable. They are for our safety. They are for our own safety and our good health. And it's important that we observe them, except that I absolutely can understand this frustration that you put in place these restrictive rules, but you don't put in place any form of mitigation that then would make it possible for us to survive and to continue to have means of livelihoods, that we continue to sustain our livelihoods even as we wait out this, because it appears we are just waiting out this crisis. So I would advise that people observe these restrictions, do what they can do to survive. I mean, Linda, is not any different. This is how we have been. This situation, this crisis only made things worse. But Kenyans have largely been on their own, especially for the last 7 years or so. We've largely been on our own with regards to sources of livelihood, the economy, jobs, youth opportunities to participate in the economy, and so on and so forth. But I would say that, again, rather than the agitation being for just survival, like how do we survive from today to tomorrow, I think the agitation should be how do we take advantage of this crisis so that, it's not just a health crisis, it's a governance crisis. How do we take advantage of this crisis to revisit where we came from and begin to talk about how we make a better Kenya so that any other form of pandemic, any other form of shock finds a better system in place, finds a better governance and political system in place. The weakest point for us, in my opinion, is a broken political system, is a broken system of governance. This is why I say don't trust automatically without questioning. Question, verify, and after you confirm, you can now give your support. So for me, let the noise be about, can this crisis force us to stop as Kenyans? Not in a frenzy of should we change the constitution or not? Should we do this or not? In a frenzy of can we talk? How come this crisis found us in such a vulnerable position, yet we could be better as Kenyans? And then from this, we develop a better national character, we develop a better political system, we develop, inshallah, a better governance system. Then we can begin to hold each other accountable.
And for the longest of time, still on that note, speaking of our systems and developing the best of the health sector, these are reports that are coming out from Kenyans, and having had conversations with them on ground. Some of them argue that it's, even at some point in time, the government argued that Kenyans do not want to go and seek medical advice because so much fear had been instilled in them in regards to COVID-19. But a majority of Kenyans will tell you today that again they go to hospitals and all the energy has been channeled towards COVID-19 talk, and they literally get the services on the issues that have taken them, different from COVID-19. You go there with a different condition. It is hectic. Some of them say that they go there in, day out. You're told, go fix your NHIF. You're told, go back, come tomorrow. Or the doctors are on strike. Or this and this and this. And it becomes hard for them. What does it speak? What does it tell us, even as we say that, yes, indeed, COVID-19 is here and we need to deal with it? Gloria.
That's just an example of what Kenyans are going through every day, even before COVID-19. One thing that you have to understand is we are talking about 13 point something million Kenyans having lost their jobs after COVID-19 has come in between the month of May and July. But look at the percentage of Kenyans that were not employed to begin with. If 75% of the youth are actually, if the 75% of our population is the youth, then, and our population is say about 50 million, then you're talking about over 37 million Kenyans are youth. And on that 37 million Kenyans, 70% of that is unemployed. This is statistics before COVID-19. So already we had millions of dependents, because I have finished my education, I'm even 20-something, 25, 26, all the way to 35, and I'm unemployed. So that means I'm either depending on somebody else who has basic minimum pay. Now, what COVID-19 has done is, now those few, the certain few that were actually employed, their jobs have now been taken away. So if you had a percentage of dependents who are literally surviving because of the basic pay of these workers, now you have definitely more than 50% of your population just struggling to breathe up and get some oxygen to survive. So they might not die of COVID-19, but they will die of poverty, they'll die of hunger, they will die of other diseases such like pneumonia, because they have probably been kicked out of their houses. They can no longer afford the rent, whether it is 500 shillings or 2,000 shillings. So when we are just deciding to say that COVID-19 is here, we are going to focus on COVID-19 and this is what we are doing, without contextualizing where our country was prior to COVID-19 and how many people were actually even surviving in that economy, we need to really think, is this a reality, or are we living in a bubble? And when you're looking at the measures that the government has taken in terms of restrictive measures in the different industries, I beg to differ with my co-panelists when he says that these measures are okay and I don't have a problem with them. When you look at the tourism industry. I think it's up just a week and a half ago when they finally said, okay, if you are now going to go to an establishment on a short holiday, then you are allowed to have alcohol within that establishment if you're residing in that establishment. Prior to that, they said we've opened the borders and locals can also, cross around the country and try to promote this industry at basic fees. And yet you are finding tourists had restrictions where you're going on holiday, but you cannot be served alcohol, and you cannot sit 4 people at the table. So if you're a family of 7, they're actually not contextualizing the restrictions that they're placing to curb COVID-19 in terms of how to ensure business continuity in the different industries. So I beg to differ, and I would like to challenge some of these authorities to really look at what are the restrictions they're putting. Are they in a sense where they contextualize the reality that we are going through? A lady called Faith Mutombe made a breakdown of how she had a startup for a water company, and she put down a breakdown of why she had to shut down that water company. And if she shuts down that company, those are probably 3 to 15 jobs that have been lost. And she said she actually gave the taxes that are being imposed on her prior to COVID-19. And then remember now what our government is doing, they're adding additional prerequisites in order for you to open your establishment post COVID-19.
Yeah.
So above and beyond the taxes and licenses that you needed to get, which were up to 8 or something, now you had to get 3 or 4 other certifications at cost in order for you to try and continue selling water, which, by the way, now people are not buying, they're probably boiling because they're cutting on costs.
On that note, let's ask Simeha this. How much more is this shrinking the business, or the business, fraternity? Because then you realize that in as much as we're talking about loss of jobs, we also are talking of individuals who run their businesses, and most of them have been closed down. The bar owners are complaining today. They say, what, did it have to go to that point where you again tell us to close down the bars? And you see around the matatu industry operating, you see churches operating, you see people moving around. Did it have to get to that point, Simeha?
I agree with Gloria on that one of alcohol. Gloria, I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
But on a very serious note, Linda, I'm just saying that COVID-19 made a bad situation worse. We are probably having unreasonable expectations that this government will suddenly become reasonable and know how to manage an economy and know how to govern and so on and so forth. I'm not that optimistic. I'm not that optimistic at all. I look at this and just see that COVID-19 or coronavirus made a bad situation worse. And for me, that's why I keep insisting. The good I could see out of this situation, out of this crisis, is if it can offer us an opportunity to go back to the political question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have any false hope that the Ministry of Finance can change and suddenly begin to fix the economy, that the Ministry of Health can suddenly change, that suddenly we can have competence in people responsible for our governance. I do not think that is going to happen. If there's thing that can force us to come together as a nation, to see this as a governance crisis, and know that we are not going to expect anything better from this crisis, but what we should expect, in my humble opinion, is an opportunity to say, look where this took us. What if something worse came? We've been through terrible, terrible times as this nation. I do not think those who are responsible for public governance will suddenly get better because of COVID-19. I think let us take advantage as a nation and stop before we go to the next elections to elect or be forced upon us another set of incompetence with a bad system, a broken political system, and then the cycle just continues. We are an extractive society where you have a small group that feeds on just extracting from others.
Yeah.
Until we fix that what makes that possible, I don't think we should expect any better, Linda. That is how pessimistic I am. That is how I'm not going to raise my hope and have false expectations that it can get better with what the system we have now and the people we have now.
And that is where we get to wind up this conversation, indeed, an extensive conversation that really would take us a day trying to deliberate on. But we all say again to Kenyans, stay woke and ensure that at least you try your best to abide by the rules. Who knows what will happen next? But importantly, we all cross fingers that indeed we're able to deal with the pandemic as a global fraternity to a point whereby again the communities or the economies are going to find or regain themselves back. It's going to take a while, like they say, or they project, but all the same, we hope for the best. Gloria Oroba, youth policy analyst and governance expert, Joseph Simeha, thank you so much for your time this morning. As we cross over to a different segment altogether, it was great having you and looking forward to have another session. Thank you also so much for the feedback. That's where we get to wind up this point and we cross over to the lifestyle segment after this break.
Thank you. Have a good day.